I would suggest I usually use that's on what do you see? Be by himself. So on the other hand, so for me to get the order, we're both holding it up. I'm not holding anyone here. You're saying it's over. There's this race for the order. Now, if you lose, you're going to get back on the order. Hello? And you're right. If I wouldn't make that kind of, I would have done that. So that's perfect. Sure. And my say you didn't. Now you want to change it to me.
Rabbi, do you know where they're recording?
This guy
Lay about that, yeah. I don't care. You say no money. It's really not, it's like whatever, but yeah.
Before we start, I want to back here that the Shuir was dedicated by the Flambo's Mishpacha, Refuah Shalema, and it's close to Refuah Shalema for Leah Bas Pela, Shepherd Refuah Shalema. We're doing here the famous sugya of Migdal Haitzi. It's basically here in Baba Basra. It's interesting that the Ran says in the end of the piece, Mikan Abanu Din Zeh. The source of the din of Migdal Haitzi, I'm reading it from here. The Rabban also said, it seems to say such a lashon, the Mikanye Shraya, Shein Omer Migdal Haitzi Gemelayna. The Rush, a little different. The Rush seems to have a source from Baba Basra, and he uses that from here. So it's a little bit unclear whether this is the Mikor from Migdal Haitzi, I'm reading, or this is just. We know it from Baba Basra, and we're just applying it from here to here. But either way, this is one of the main sources for the basic din of Migdal Haitzi Lo Amrina. Basically, just to run through the Taisus, the Mishnah says Shnai Mochsim Mitawis. So Zomer Kuda Shali, we do Yachleiku. Zomer Kuda Shali, Zomer Chetza Shali. So on the half that he's made there, there's no shaila, so that goes to the person everyone agrees it's his. On the other half, there's a disagreement. This one says it's his, and this one says it's his. So we do a yachloiku on that half. So therefore, one gets 3/4 and one gets 1/4. That's what it says in the Mishnah. Frektais is a kasha. Why don't we believe the person who says Chetzi Shali with a migui that it could have said Kuda Shali? If he would have said Kuda Shali, he would have gotten half because we would have done a Yachleiku because they're arguing on the whole talis. So now that he says Chetzi Shali has a migui, we should believe it and give him the full half. So Taisa seems to answer, of course, the Rabba, Migdal Haitzi Lo Amrina, the Bechetz of Hasheni, Muksik Zeh Kimo Zeh. Since in the second half, the Chetz of Hasheni means the half that they're arguing about. The half that they're not arguing about, there's nothing to talk about. But the half that they're arguing about, Muksik Zeh Kimo Zeh, therefore it's a Migdal Haitzi, and Migdal Haitzi Lo Amrina. Okay. There are, I think, 3 or 4 questions on this sugya. We'll start with, some of them are not necessarily so difficult. You could give answers to, though I'm not sure they're so nice. And maybe some are a little bit harder questions. The most simple question, which is stop, what is the svara? Why Migdal Haitzi Lo Amrina? Why? Why is a Migdal Haitzi Lo Amrina? You say, well, what do you mean? Because a migui is fighting a muksik. A muksik is a very strong force. You need to be a strong power to beat a muksik. So migui is not strong enough to beat a muksik. The problem is, okay, that could be, we know there's machlekes amaroim, whether a raiv can be mighty from a muksik. Okay, so according to Shmuel, raiv can't be mighty from a muksik. Okay, so you say just like raiv can't be mighty, migui can't be mighty. Rav holds raiv could be mighty from a muksik. We have a machlekes amaroim and bari v'shema can be mighty from a muksik. So, like, why? What is it that migui? So you have to say, it's a simple shot. So I don't say it's such a shver. You say that even though Shmuel, obviously if Tavis answers the Mishnah, Migdal Haitzi Lo Amrina, it has to work according to everybody. So even Rabba holds Raiv Lo Haitzi Amrina, has to agree, Migdal Haitzi Lo Amrina. So the simple shot, you'll say, it's okay. It's apparently, Migui is worse than a Raiv, Migui is worse than a Bari V'Shema. Even though there's a day of the Bari Shema can be mighty, Migui can't be mighty. Even though there's a day of the Raiv can be mighty, Migui can't be mighty. We know we do use Migui by Yisurim. It's not like Migui is weak Kayach. It's migui. We rely on migui by pashas, we find it for a woman says she's divorced. We believe her pashas with a migui, depending on the case. Okay, it's not. You have to go into it, not the time, but the Maisa, okay, that would be the push-up shot, but it's not so simple. In other words, the first question is, what's Kufa the Hezber, why Migui Haitzid Aminin? And the simple answer is, because Migui is a weak bearer, it's a weaker bearer than Rav and Bar Shema, etc., and therefore it's not strong enough to Maitzi. Okay. Second question, which is a much stronger question, is that how does Taisus apply in our sugya this svara Migui Haitzid Amrin? When do we say Migui Haitzid Amrin? And that's when you have the Migui fighting a muksik. But over here, Taisus' lashon is the bechetzav hasheni muksik zekem ozeh, which simplistically means that they're both muksik. So if they're both muksik, so why can't the Migui work? If you have a tug-of-war fight, and you have an equal forces on both sides, so they cancel out. You have a tug-of-war. You have a muksik on one side and the muksik on the other side, so that it does nothing. So now you add the migui to one side, so it's like it's a math. If you have an equation, you can drop the whatever in equal numbers on both sides, and they cancel out. So why should it be Bishlama in Basra? There the migui is fighting a muksik, and there is no muksik on the side of the migui. But over here, where there's a muksik on the side of the migui, so you have a migui plus a muksik against a muksik. So if migui alone can win, apparently if it wouldn't be a migui l'haitzi, the migui alone would win. Apparently migui is strong enough to pass in a shayda when there's no muksik. So now you take a muksik and you put on both sides of the equation, so pashas, the two muksik should cancel out, and the migui should win. What makes this question much stronger, and it might be, I'm not even sure, to be honest, I'll answer it so well at the end, but because for the sake of honesty, we'll say the question is that the Taisus a rush. It's one thing that Taisus applies it, okay, Migui Haitzid Amrin, maybe he's making a big chiddush, he's extending it, a radical chiddush. But the Taisus a rush, his lashon is, V'yesh l'haimar, the Vimash, appears Rivam B'cheskes Abatim. Gabi Hilchas, I'm reading the last four lines of Taisus a rush. Gabi Hilchas, the Rav Yisrael, the Amina Migui Haitzid Amrin, B'cheskes Nicha. So Hokinami, B'cheskes Hokinami, Chashir Shnei Mutzakim. Like, bringing a rye from Baba Basra. Like, what in the world? Can't bring a rye from Baba Basra. In Baba Basra, it's a classical, simple case of Migui versus a Muksik. But over here, Shnei Mutzakim. So there's such a tremendous difference. You want to say a chiddush that Afal Pikein somehow will come up with some sort why it's shaykh to say Migui Haitzid here too. But to go ahead and to say, according to the Rivam said about Basra, everything's good. It's as if it's exactly like Baba Basra, is very strange. Pashtus, the Nachas David asks this question on Taisus. It's not clear. Nachas David's lashon is a little difficult, so I don't want to promise, but that's the Pashtus. That's the Nachas David asks this kasha. Since both people are considered muksik, so what shaykh to say here, Migui Haitzid? I think last time we learned this, in Shuir we said, it's also this, that last time we said a relatively simple answer, but I'm not sure if it's a good answer, but we'll say the simple answer, that muksik is a very unclear kayach, what a muksik is. Muksik is based on the svara mandika v'ekeva yedach v'beyasya. It's very, very unclear what that is. What's that mean? What does that mean? A person who needs a doctor, who has a pain, should go to the doctor. What does that mean? So at least some people, it seems to be a gigantic machlokes, but at least some people learn that the simple pshat is it's not a kayach abirur, it's only a defensive force. You can't take it away from me. It's different. Muksik is different than everything else. Everything else is a birur. It's a raya that's mine. You can't take it away from me because I have a raya that's mine. Chazaka paskins that it's mine. The raya is a birur that it's mine. But this is not, you could say, man the covenant gave it says, Eino chinami, it might not be mine. I'm not claiming it's mine. I don't, the fact that I'm mupsik does not in any which way prove that it's mine. But I'll be gain, you can't take it away from me, because man the covenant gave us. So it's a totally, what we call a totally defensive power. So the svara would be that if muksik is only defensive, so two muksiks don't cancel out. In other words, if you would have the motion we gave in a tug of war. So if I have a defensive power in my tug of war, I pour cement into the ground to cement me into the ground, and then you pour cement to cement you in the ground. Then we're not canceling out. Now you're migui. Now you're throwing a migui. The migui by itself is fighting the cement. The migui can't say, "Well, I have cement on my side, therefore it's the migui plus the cement can fight the cement." The cement on one side of the tug of war does not help to fight the other side's cement. If it's a defensive force, so it doesn't cancel out the other defensive force. So Memeda, it comes out that it's a migui all by itself, which is fighting the muksik, and a migui, I'm reading. That would be that's how we said it. We learned in Shuir, that's how we learned the simple pshat. That's what I learned years ago, as I saw it, since he wrote it up. That way, that the simple pshat in Taifas would be that Taifas holds that muksik is a defensive force, not an offensive force. And since it's a defensive force, so two defensive forces don't cancel out. Each one remains defensive, and therefore, if you want to be mitzi from the defensive force, there's no assist to the other, my defensive force, it doesn't assist me to beat your defensive force. It'll assist me that you can't beat my defensive force, but it doesn't help me to beat your defensive force. Here, if both defensive forces would be equal, we would say yachloiko. But Taivas' whole kasha is that we want yachloiko on the half, which would mean quarter and 3/4. Taivas' whole kasha is that we shouldn't do yachloiko. We should give the entire half to the person with the migui, which means that we want to use his migui to beat the muksik that says altos yemi safek. So you can't use the fact that he has a Taivas answer, it's a migui, because the fact that he has a defensive force of muksik doesn't help him to take out away from the other person's defensive force. Okay. That would be the simple pshat in Taivas. The problem with that pshat is it's not so simple. Is because those with the kiyas know that whether muksik is a defensive or offensive is a giant machlokes. The Shef Shemaitza, it says in a few places that muksik is an offensive power. It's based on chazaka. You can't change from the status quo. You can say maybe Ksais holds it's both, or you could still answer the question. But it's not so. Pashut also, there are certain achreidim or rishonim that say that just like Migui I'm reading, Migui can't be mitzi from a chazaka either. It's a shaila. Can Migui be mitzi from a chazaka? Cheskes Isser. And over there, that's definitely not a defensive force. Cheskes Isser by Yisurim. There's only this whole svara of Antikov in Ekeva is only a svara by Mammon. There is no such pashtas svara of Antikov in Ekeva by Isser. Isser, you need a bearer, a din bearer, whatever it is, but it has to be an active offensive power, and there are those Rishonim. The great in the his Klaya Migui is very much marach in this, and Migui the I'm reading is even the Haitzi from a Chazaka, also Rashba. Okay. So that would not be so simple. Okay. So that's so that would be the second question. So again, let's just go over. The first question is, what is the svara of Migui Haitzi I'm reading? Why not? The second question is, how can you apply here the svara of Migui Haitzi I'm reading? When do we say Migui Haitzi I'm reading? In Baba Basra, that's when the Migui is fighting a muksik. But here, the Migui has an assist, he has a muksik on his side. So it's a Migui plus a muksik, pashas, the two, a Migui plus a muksik versus a muksik, pashas, the two muksiks should cancel out, and the Migui should win. Okay. The third question, which we got stuck on in Shuir, and we tried to say an answer, but I wasn't so happy with it, is that there's the immediate previous Taisus, very famous Taisus Yachleiku. Taisus asks the Kasha, why in the Mishnah do we say Yachleiku? Why don't we say Kol Adam Gavar? Where he brings a raya from Rabba, that by Rabba we say, when the two people are fighting about a boat, we say Kol Adam Gavar. Very famous Taisus. So Taisus answers that over there they're Eichsin, and that Eichsin creates some kind of a non-sadi, and therefore we can't say Kol Adam Gavar. Extremely difficult Taisus. If anyone who learns the Taisus knows why in the world is there a non-sadi over there. The Rush brings in some kind of Nasr of Abba, the Sugya of Basra, Nasr of Abba, that there's on the night toughest Heidi day. How in the world that applies over here when two people are running to pick up a talis, and we know how the person's holding it. Very difficult Taisus. Much arichas is said on that Taisus. For whatever reason, it seems to be the big arichas in the beginning of Bar Mitzvah. The problem is, l'chayra, according to our Taisus, what was Taisus' kasha? Taisus should have just answered. If just like Miga the Heights, you know what I'm reading, called Adam Davar the Heights, you know what I'm reading. Right? But it's a simple answer. Right? When our Taisus says Miga the Heights, you know what I mean, and he's not using this on Sadi. He doesn't say anything about Sadi. He quotes the sugya of Baba Basra. The Rush quotes the sugya of Baba Basra over there, of Baba Basra with Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef, which has nothing to do with Nasr of Abba. There's no Sadi in that sugya. So the Taisus is simply saying this Svara, and our Taisus also quotes. He continues. He quotes that sugya of Baba Basra Lamed Gimel. Lamed Day. Sorry, Lamed Day. So our Taisus also quotes that Taisus. So if you see when our Taisus is saying Mikra Ha'itz, you know I'm reading. It has nothing to do with Nasr of Abba. It has nothing to do with Anan Sadi. So it just stopped, because since the Migo is fighting a Muksik, so the Migo can't fight a Muksik. So why did Taisus just say a simple answer? You ask the Kasha from Rabba. So how come by Rabba we say Kol Don and Gavar, and here we don't? In order to answer the Kasha, you just have to find any difference between here and Rabba, and you answer the question. The answer is simple. Over here there's a Muksik. We don't say Kol Don and Gavar against a Muksik. So the Pashib Shot, the way everybody learns Shot, why didn't Taisus just answer that simply because he's Muksik? Because since they're both Muksik, they cancel out. But here we see Taisus holds the two Muksiks don't cancel out. Right? There's a steer in Taisus. The fact that Taisus asked the Kasha that you should say Kol Dam Gavar, like Arba, even though what's the comparison? Arba, you don't have no one's Muksik by Arba. The boat, it's sort of like two people fighting about a boat. The boat's in the ocean. No one's Muksik there. We say Kol Dam Gavar. Over here is a Muksik. What's Taisus' Kasha? You say Pashit, you say then you're not going to be mighty from a Muksik. Torah says you have to go by a Muksik. That's a din Torah. You got to follow the Muksik. How can you do Kol Dam Gavar against a Muksik? Teretz says Taisus' whole kasha because he understood that Muksik doesn't apply here because since they're both holding, the two Muksiks cancel out. B'meida, it's the same as Arba. That's Pashib Shah in the previous Taisus. That it's the two Muksik cancel out. B'meida, they're equal. You have a suffix, and just like by Arba, when we have a suffix, we say Kol Dam Gavar. Here also we have a suffix. We should say Kol Dam Gavar. So, but Gufa is to steer it to the next Taisus. In our Taisus Gufa is saying that the two Muksiks don't cancel out. Especially we gave a hesber because Muksik is defensive. And it's a defensive, they can't cancel out. Because one can't cancel out the other. Especially we gave a beautiful hesber. So they're defensive and they can't cancel out. So then you can't say Kol Dam Gavar because it comes out just like you can't say a Migoy against a Muksik. You can't say a Kol Dam Gavar against a Muksik. Obviously, how can you say Kol Dam Gavar against a Muksik?
Why isn't the Sosos building off the answer?
What?
Why isn't the Sosos building off the previous?
Because he's not quoting the last Taisus was saying Anan Sadi. This Taisus,
It doesn't need a quote.
it's not, I'm sorry. If all the Rishonim from the beginning to end. No one says a word about a non-tzaddik. I do not believe. Not one Rishon says here a non-tzaddik. I do not believe that Tavis here means a non-tzaddik. Plus, he quotes the Gemara in Basra Lamed Beis. And in Basra Lamed Beis, there's no non-tzaddik. There's no non-tzaddik about Basra Lamed Beis. But the guy, we have a shayla whether you owe the person money. There's no if a shayla if I owe you money, if you know why you're holding it, because I say I lent you the money. That's why you're holding it. There's no Nasra Rabba in Basra Lamed Beis. Tavis equates it. Tavis himself equates it. And the Rush brings a raya from there. So everyone, it's clear from it's pretty beferish that our Tavis has nothing to do with the non-tzaddik. I think that's very, very bukruch. So why the Taisus, if our Tavis doesn't need the non-tzaddik, and he can just say, Migul Haitzi Lo Amrinin, so why the Taisus and the previous Tavis have to come up with this whole radical chiddush of a non-tzaddik? Okay, that's the question. Okay, so I want to do one more question, and then I'm going to try and figure out an answer. Really from this last question to figure out an answer. There's a very, I left out something. I'm sorry, I forgot something I should have said. There is a Rabbi Hoshana that they quote that wants to give an answer to the question. What we said is a Nachas David's Kasha. I left it out, I should have said it before. That the Nachas David's Kasha was, we said, that if they're both muksik, so how can you say the two muksik should cancel out? So what is Shaycher Migel Haitzi Lo Amrina? So they quote the Rabbi Hoshana, and it's in the Chelik Beis, that he brings a possibility that maybe Tavis doesn't mean they're both muksik in the whole thing. It just means they're both muksik in half. It means, again, in the half that they're fighting about. The half that he's made, we're not discussing. But the half that they're fighting, when Tavis says the Bechetza Hasheni, what that means, the half that they're fighting, muksik zeh kemo zeh, Tavis means that each guy's muksik in half of that half. Which means he's only muksik in a quarter. There's a half that you're made, of course, the person he's made, that's his. He's muksik, it's 100% his, no shayla. Now they're fighting over the second half. So Tavis is saying that the chetzav hasheni muksik zeh kemo zeh. He doesn't mean that they're both muksik in the whole half. He means that one's muksik in half the half, the other one's muksik in the other half of the half. So then it's very good. Comes out when you want to go ahead and use your migui to get the entire half of the second half. You're fighting against his muksik, and you don't have a muksik to support you because you're only muksik in half of that half. That's what supposedly, that's what the Rabbi Hoshana mentioned such a possibility, that what Tavis means is that when Tavis says muksik zeh kemo zeh, they're both muksik halfway. Problem is that that's not so mashma on the lashon of Tavis. Tavis says v'chetz sheni muksik zeh kemo zeh. All the Risha, it sounds like that they're muksik in the chetz of Hasheni. Chetz of Hasheni means the entire half. Everybody else is also the same lashon. It's all, that no one, everyone sounds like that they're muksik in the whole thing, but that they bring, it's not even my point. Other people point this out, that the Ran says beferish, and then looking in the Chiddushei Ran, that's the third, in Maramakom, says v'yesh mishater tekiv shezeh toives omei v'zeh toives v'oimei havle kolchad ha'ha kilu muksik b'kulo v'chavero kilu motzim miyot v'avle hai migel afugim l'mayna. So he says beferish that each guy's muksik in the whole thing. So this passage will answer that to be daichek Tavis is lashon, that when Tavis says muksik zeh kemo zeh, he only meant their muksik in half, and therefore he doesn't have a muksik to support him, because he's only muksik on a quarter, and the other guy's muksik on a quarter, and now he wants to Tavis his whole kashrut, he should get the whole half, but that's the farish in the Ran, not like that. The Ran says, the farish muksik b'kula. And again, I say the lashon of Taisus is mashra that way. So this is the later Achreinim point this out, Rashivas point this out, that it's pretty clear that Taisus means that each guy's muksik in the whole thing. Okay. Alright, so I want to move on to the Taisus Rid. The Taisus Rid is very, very interesting. Let's read the Taisus Rid inside. For Eitzim Mitartim, he has the same kasha as Taisus. Sounds like Taisus is answered. The Rivan. The Ein Neredi Teretz said, I don't like this teretz. Shigam zeh muksek lahakseku. Shekachu muksek b'akir chaveiro. Okay, and then it brings a raya. That they're both muksek. So it, to me, it's very strange. The way everyone says the answer, our Taiva says the answer. He brings it. He says, "To be good, I say lo aminin." Why? To the chetz of Hasheni muksek zeh k'mo zeh. Chetz of the Rosh says, "The Hokinami b'os chetz she'ogan of chashiv shnei mukzakim." The Ran says, "The king that so every Rishon, the Ramban, same thing. They all point when they want to explain why this is a problem of Migid HaHaitzi, they all say because they're both holding the whole thing, therefore it's a problem of Migid HaHaitzi. Comes it on the Taiva's Rid, and he seemingly says this exact same thing. And he uses that to slug up the teretz. It's like a manda. The very, it's not that I can't hear him in Svara, but it's just, you're not talking to each other. It's just the Rishonim, they say, there should be a Yashrit. Which is the Yashrit? All the Rishonim say, since they're both muksik, so therefore it's a Migid HaHaitzi, no aminin. And the Taiva's Rid says, oh, you can't say Migid HaHaitzi, no aminin, because they're both muksik. Like Mimadashav, does both muksik, as I can hear, as far as the diamond does and whatever it is, I can hear a svara that, like the Taiva, I can never hear a Taiva's Rid svara, but since they're both muksik, there's no Migid HaHaitzi. But apparently all the Rishonim are saying, Pumpaker, that if they're both muksik, that does make a problem Migid HaHaitzi, whatever the hezber. So now the Taiva's Rid, without adding any added hezber, just says the exact same words that everyone else is saying, and says, oh, that proves that it's not Migid HaHaitzi. It's not mistavra. If the Rishonim are talking to each other, Rishonim, there's a certain yashris. If the yashris of all the Rishonim, Taisus and Rosh, the Ran, the Ramban, that if they're both muksik, that's a reason to be Migid HaHaitzi. Where does the Taiva's Rid come along and say, oh, since they're both muksik, they're not Migid HaHaitzi? I thought that was extremely strange. So I wanted to be mechanic. I think maybe it's a little radical, but I don't know. I think it was that the Taiva's Rid, when he brings Reitzim Mitartzim, is not bringing the same answer as all the other Rishonim. He's bringing a different answer. And since he's bringing a different answer, it gets slugged up in fakir, and it makes sense why his answer gets slugged up and the other Rishonim don't. If you look at his lashon, he says, "Reitzim etartzim didominim migokim lahaksik biyado, v'lo lahoitzim echavero." Now they skip the middle case. I don't know why. The middle case is when no one's holding it. They skips it. Okay. Now the Ramban, who's says really the same thing. As everybody else. If you look at the last line of the Ramban, the last line Makom, u'b'kan yesh raya shein oimrim migid afuke b'mayna and ukme b'mayna. Right? But it's the converse order. The Taiva's Rid says that Amina migid kiyim lahachzik, v'lo lahaitzik. The Ramban is saying shein oimrim migid afuke b'mayna and ukme b'mayna. Right, so Paji will say, yeah, that's okay. So it's just La dafka, basically it's the same thing. It's two sides of the coin. So you decide which one you put first. But I would like to claim that's the main part. Everybody else, every Rishon is really saying that Migui lo Haitzi lo Amina. Right? That the emphasis is on that we don't say Migui lo Haitzi. The Taivas Arid is saying that Amina Migui Kiyim la Hafsik. Meaning the Taivas Arid had a different answer. It's a similar answer, but it's a different. The other Rishonim are saying that Migui can't work if it's a Haitzi. The Taivas Arid is saying Migui can't work if it's not Lahapsik. Now it's very beautiful that what Gufa, what slugs up the Taivas Arid is Miyashiv everybody else. Because in our case, we say they're both considered holding. For some reason or another, we don't know why, this is one of our questions, when two people are considered holding, the two muksuks don't cancel out. So therefore it comes out that fakir, both the Taivas Arid and all the Rishonim grant that basic premise, that when you have two muksuks, they don't cancel out. So therefore, according to the Taivas Arid, who's saying that in order for the migu to work, you need a hatzik. Well, you have a hatzik. They're both a hatzik. So that's his problem. So then he says, I don't understand you. Right? As you see from his lotion, he's not saying it's not lahaitzi. He's saying shigam zeh lahatziku. In other words, the whole Yisrael, the Taivas Rid was that in order for migu to work, you need a hatzik. He says, okay, you have a hatzik. They're both a hatzik. If they're both a hatzik, that's called a hatzik. Everybody else was saying that migu doesn't work when it's a haitzik. Oh, this is a haitzik because they're both mupzik. It's a haitzik. So they're fakir. It's very good. They're both saying the same thing because they're agreeing. They're both saying, there's a way the Taivas Rid slugs up his answer by quoting the same Yisai that everybody else is saying to make their answer. There's one Yisai that everybody agrees to. That if two people are muksik, it's considered they don't cancel out. And they're both muksik. And therefore they're both muksik, and it's considered a hafsik, and it's considered a haitzi, because they're both, they don't get canceled out. If they don't get canceled out, so then it's considered a hafsik, and if they don't get canceled out, it's considered a haitzi. So the Taivas Rid who brought an answer that in order we can't say we only say miga when it's a hafsik. So then he says, ain't nearly turns to shigam said a hafsik. Because if they're both muksik, they don't cancel out. Consider a hafsik. The Taisvis and all the other Rishonim which are saying a different answer, that we don't say migui when it's the haitzi, so they say the same thing. Oh, they're both holding, so it's a haitzi, because they don't get canceled out. So it made sense that they use the exact same lashon because they're making the same point. They're both making the point that both of them are the haitzi and both of them are the hafsik. Both of them have mutzakim. Therefore, it's simultaneously the hafsik and the haitzi. Except the difference is what is the criteria. The Taivas Rid put down a yesod that migui needs lahafsik. So Meneda, by saying that they're both lahafsik, he shrugs himself up. While our Taisus and all the other Rishonim and the Rabban, etc., they say that migui can't be the haitzi, so they say, well, they're both the haitzi, so that works. So they're not the argument between the Taivas Arid and everyone else is not in the Ve'ein Nira, the argument is in the opening line. That's what we said, because that's why they used opposite Lashonos. The Tavis Arid is saying, Zarmina Migo Ki in a Hachzik, and that's what he emphasized, Ein Ner Tir Zernik the Gamzat a Hachziku, because his whole emphasis is on a Hachzik. So you need a Hachzik. Migo needs a Hachzik. Then he says he has a good shlug up. That doesn't make sense. This is a Hachzik. Well, all the other Rishonim are saying that Migui, it's not that Migui needs a Hachzik, Migui can't work L'Hachzik. What does this do for us? It just helps us when we're trying to figure out the Svara. Because now, assuming we're right, which I think it is really mashma from the Lashon of Tavis Rid, it's we have to come up, we can no longer use the svara that we were saying before. Before we were saying a svara, why is Migui L'Haitzi Lo Amrinit? Because Migui has a certain weakness, and it's not strong enough to beat out when it's fighting a muksik. And there's two muksik, because muksik is defensive, so therefore the other defensive muksik can't help me, so I am my own and fighting, or the Migui on his own is fighting a muksik, and the Migui on the own is fighting a muksik, the Migui loses. You can't say anything like that in the Tavis Rid. The Tavis Rid Svara is that the Migui needs a Lahachzik in order to work. Why should there be that, if you don't have a Lahachzik, then you can't, it's not because you're fighting something, it's not because the Migui doesn't work because he's fighting, he's saying because the Migui doesn't work if it doesn't have a Lahachzik. Why should you need a Lahachzik for the Migui to work? What kind of svara is that? That the Migui only works if it's a Lahachzik. And it has two Lahachziks, it still works. And why don't we say that two Lahachziks cancel out? That already, it's one thing that the two Lahachziks don't cancel out, because the Lahachziks are defenses. But Lahachziks, they should cancel out, because the Tavis Rid is using my Lahachzik to take away from your Lahachzik. Right? The Tavis Rid is using, see, a little confusing. In Taisis, Tavis was saying that the Migui doesn't work. So he's saying that because the Migui is fighting your defensive force, and he can't. We said that he can't use his defensive force to fight your defensive force. So therefore, the Migui loses. But in the Tavis Rid, he's saying that the Migui wins to beat your force. So why should the Migui win? Well, because he's supported by the Hatzik, but he's fighting also on the Hatzik. So just like he's being supported by the Hatzik, he's being fighting on the Hatzik. So why in the world, in other words, here the svara of defenses don't work because he's actually winning. The Yashris was supposed to be Yachloiku. Yachloiku would mean you're only supposed to get 3/4 and 1/4. Now, because you have a Migui and it's a Haksik, so you're getting the other quarter. Which means why? If you wouldn't be the Haksik, the Migui wouldn't be strong enough to give you the other quarter. But because it's a Haksik, the Migui can give you the other quarter. But that Migui is just like it's a Haksik, but it's also fighting the other person's Haksik. If anything, our Svara of defense, it would be the opposite Svara. So it's fighting the other person's defense of a Haksik. How can you fight the other person's defense of a Haksik? So what in the world, in the Tavis Rid, which I believe we got the right shot, you see, it keeps on emphasizing the Haksik, the kasha that we had, in other words, to say it, let me just say it again, clearer. There's, an Afiyani is Daiti, there's two different shittas in the Rishayim here. Our Tavis has a shita that Migui L'Haitzi Lo Amrinit. The Tavis Rid has a svara that Migui, unless it's a Haksik, Lo Amrinit. Our Tavis says that if both people are considered holding, it's still called a Migui L'Haitzi. Tavis Rid says the same thing. If both people are muksik, it's still called a Migui L'Haksik. It's the same thing. We had a question on our thesis that why is that true? If both people are considered holding, why do the two muksa cancel out? So we tried to say a svara because muksa is defensive, and therefore a defensive force doesn't help you when you want to beat out the other person. You can't use your defensive force to beat out the other person. But in the typhus rid, we would have the exact same kasha, and we can't give that answer because the typhus rid, we're saying migui doesn't work unless it's a hachzik. Now, how you do it means you're using your hachzik to beat the other person. But how can you use your hachzik to beat the other person? He also has an hachzik. So how can you use your hachzik to beat his hachzik? See, the two hachzik should cancel out, and if the two hachzik cancel out, then your migui is without an hachzik. So what I think you have to say is a little bit of a different story here. Is the reason again, the question is, why is it that migui l'haitzi lo amidin? Why is it that according to our taisus, migui can't work l'haitzi even if there's two muktzaks on both sides? And why in the taisus arid, migui can only work l'hachzik even if there's two l'hachziks on both sides? Apparently, it seems to me, as far as is that you have to say that migui is weaker. Like we said, migui is weaker than a raiv, and migui is weaker than a bar v'shama, because raiv and bar v'shama are all biurim in the Torah. Those are vadai halachic kaiches. There's no pasuk for migui. Migui is a svara. So and it's not pashut that the migui is true. Maybe the person didn't think of it. Maybe the person lost a daite. So it seems, I would say, it's just like we found in Gittin that there's a concept that you need a taina sometimes. It's a certain tanina, that there's a certain thing that Bezdin won't be choshesh for something unless the person tainas. So according to many people, it's not that the taina is a kayach ne'amanis, but the taina makes us, is ma'ira the suffix. If there's a suffix, so you should have the suffix without the taina. If there's no suffix, so why does the taina do anything? But there's such a concept that without something being ma'ira the suffix, we don't clear the suffix. There's such a concept in the sugya there in Tanina. So you have the same thing. I would say that the typhus rid holds that you need the mukzik, you want to come up with a migui. Mi omer that migui is a raya. So you need an advocate, someone to advocate for the migui. So once someone advocates for the migui, then here it could be it's a raya. There's someone advocating against him, but it's ma'ira the shayva, as it makes us. I heard this once on Hoshana brings out this story that when there's a machlokes is not the same as when it's a suffix. He said in halacha, when you have a machlokes, we don't suffix. We say suffix drabah nekuda. The machlokes, you can't say suffix drabah nekuda necessarily. It's a machlokes. The fact that there's a machlokes gives more credence to each side. There's a person advocating that way. You can't just ignore it. You can't just brush it aside and say so. I'm taking back my law from it wasn't much more complicated what he said. But that concept that when the typhus rid is holding that stam azai, we have a migui. Who says Bezin are choshesh going to rely on a migui? It doesn't say we're in the Torah relying on a migui. Who says this is a raya? Maybe the guy didn't think of it. Who knows what this is? A raya. If the muktzah comes along and advocates that there's a migui, then already we have to go for the migui. There's a koyach or muktzah against him. But once there's an equal force at ba'ira the shayla, then we go with the migui. Taivas shita is the opposite. Taivas shita is the starting point is we have a migui. But once there's a suffix that's ba'ira, that maybe the migui is not reliable, then we drop the migui. In other words, let's say like that, I'm claiming as follows, that when you have two equal chazakas fighting each other, forget about the offensive, defensive, you don't have to say that at all. That the two equal forces, they make a suffix. But when two equal forces fight each other, it's not the same as when they don't fight each other. When you don't have anything fighting each other, you don't have a suffix. There's nothing bringing the shaila. There's nothing that's raising the issue to Bezdin. So Bezdin, in a certain sense, can just forget about the issue. We don't have to done on that. We're not machshir that shaila. But when you have two halachic forces fighting, each saying a different opinion, then that forces the issue to the front. So according but the opposite, it just now tightness and the tightness read are in opposite direction how it works. According to Taisvis, the starting point is that we assume migui is good. But when we have a force of muksik that's saying that the migui is no good, because what do you mean? The guy maybe didn't think of it. Who said migui is a raya? Miyamar that migui is a raya. Maybe Stami didn't think of it. It's not necessarily a raya. So when there's a muksik that's pushing that the migui is not a raya, then we don't follow migui. It's not because the bearer of the muksik makes us convinced, because we have a bearer the other way. The two bearers cancel out. But the two bearers cancel out, leave it with a suffix. And the suffix is enough to destroy the migui. You wanted to rely on a migui. Now there's a shaila. Wait a second. We're not so sure anymore that the migui is a good raya. According to Tavis Minastam, we would rely on the raya of migui. We would assume migui is a raya. But now that there's a controversy, there was a person came in and said, "Hey, who said that it's not true?" There's you have a guy. You assume, if no basis, you assume he's reliable. He has a sign up, rabbi, doctor, whatever it is. It's not he's reliable. Now someone calls it. Well, you asking him, you're trusting him. He's an Amma. He doesn't know nothing. He's a Russia with Russia. And then you get another guy says, "No, what do you mean? He's a tzaddik, he's saying item." So they cancel out. But you're left with a shaila. Without, before they came along, I know shaila wasn't going to clear. The guy's a shingle. He says he's a rabbi. The rabbi. He says he's a doctor. The doctor. I don't clear. Now that there's a fight, even though they halachically cancel out, they create the shaila. So they create the shaila. They kill them. They kill the migui. That's Tavis Shita. The Tavis Rich Shita is the exact same thing, but it's just a different starting point. The starting point is that not the peasant would have followed the migui, the peasant would ignore the migui. Oh, who said that this is such a good raya? Well, I don't know. But now that there's a fight, that the two Hachzik says, "What do you mean?" The Hachzik comes in and says, "It's a tremendous raya here. You gotta look. There's a raya." Because one Hachzik comes in and says the migui is a good raya. So even though the other Hachzik says it's not a good raya, he raises the possibility that maybe there is a raya now. It could be. Maybe. I hear the guy brought this to our attention. So they're both saying they're basically similar, just starting from different sides of different starting points. So the basic story is that what Daisus and the Talmud are saying is that since over here it's not pshat, the reason why the migui is not that it's entices. It's not that the migui that I'm reading because the muksik beats the migui. Because like Eric, muksik doesn't beat bar the shema, muksik doesn't beat chazarai, muksik wouldn't beat a migui either. Because the migui, if migui would be a raya, the muksik wouldn't beat it. At least according to those shitas. But we're not. But when we have a fight between the true chazakas, they create a suffix. Maybe the muksik's not a raya, which we have to clear. It's a good shaila. Maybe the muksik's not a raya. Or not the muksik, the migui. Sorry, maybe the migui is not a raya. So then the migui can't work, and the type is written is the opposite. How does that answer the kashas? So therefore, it comes out very nicely with as far as Taisus Yachlaiku, that we're saying as follows. We're saying that the reason why Migul Haitzilo Aminin is not because Migul can't beat a Muksik. That's not the part. Really, in this case, since they're both, each person's Muksik in the whole thing, so Vada Taibis agrees that the two Muksiks equalize each other. Each one's Muksik, so the two Muksiks cancel out. All our Taibis is saying is that even though they cancel out, they leave a suffix. They leave a suffix so that they put a suffix in the Migui. So now, since Migui is not a pasuk and there's no Mikar, so we're not so convinced to use the Migui anymore. We can't just stop blindly follow the Migui because there's a suffix. There was someone that said the Migui is no good. So Migui, that's why the Migui doesn't work. But by Kol Daram Gavar, no one ever claimed Kol Daram Gavar as a beaver. No one ever. So Taivas Kasha is a good Kasha, right? In other words, Taivas is not answering. If we thought Taisus was answering Migul Haitzilo Aminin because there's a force of Muksik, which is a birur, and it's paskening its mind, and Migul can't beat the Kayach of birur of Muksik. So then we ask the Kasha, so if Migul can't beat the Kayach of birur of Muksik, so surely Kol Daram Gavar can't beat the power of Muksik. So what was Taivas' Kasha in the previous Taivas say Kol Daram Gavar? But now that we're saying that's not Shad in Taisus. Taivas is not saying, Taivas knows that the two muksiks cancel out in their biurim. But Taivas is just saying that the two muksiks make a suffix, and then once they make a suffix, you can't be so confident to rely on the migui. So how can you rely on that migui? There's a tumult, there's someone that says it's no good. Someone says it is good, so it's a suffix. It's a suffix. You can't rely on it. So then that's not a reason to stop Kol Daram Gavar. Taivas' whole kasha from Arba is that the makam suffix you're supposed to say Kol Daram Gavar. So therefore, Taivas could never give. It's not like we said in the beginning. When this first Taivas, the reason why Taivas asked the kasha from Arba, even though he knows that over here there's a muksik here, because since they're both muksik, as the kayach or muksik, they cancel out, and you're left with a suffix. If you're left with a suffix, so we see by Arba, whenever you have a suffix, you say Kol Daram Gavar. Therefore, Taivas asked the kasha from Arba. He had to answer a tremendous kiddush that somehow or another you get a non-sadi. Okay, that was the previous Taisus. But in this Taisus, he doesn't need. He's just saying that even though the two muksiks cancel out, but they're ma'ira a suffix, and they're ma'ira a suffix, Memeda, we're not convinced that we can use the kayach amigui. It puts a reyes on the migui. It's a reyes, there's a suffix the fanenu, which makes a reyes on the migui, and this is a reyes on the migui. So in the migui, it's a reyes. You can't say a reyes and Kol Daram Gavar. Kol Daram Gavar is not a birur. There's no such thing as a reyes. So therefore, it's very good that Taivas' answer that he gave to Migui would not have applied to Arba, and that's why Taivas in the previous Taivas asked his kasha from Arba and didn't answer like he answered here from Migui.